Most of the words in our liturgy today and the songs that we're singing are connected to civil rights, African American spiritual. We just heard and we sang it's considered to be the African American national anthem, Black national anthem. Is that song that we sang? It's difficult, but it was lovely to hear all of you singing it. Thank you. When I was in fifth grade, our family gathered around the TV one April evening, watch a special news report, a man that at the time I'd never heard of. So I asked something like, who's this Martin Luther King guy they're talking about, and why did someone shoot him? And my dad's response with surprisingly somber reverence was something like, you never heard of Martin Luther King? He was a civil rights, you don't teach about him in school. He was killed fighting for rights for people. I was only 10 years old at the time. I doubt my parents had mentioned Dr. King to me, so I'm not sure the school system had failed me or was the only one, but there's so much power in telling this little story of my life because my father was very conservative and a racist in many ways, but back in the day, Martin Luther King Jr.'s work transcended politics. The whole civil rights movement by 1968 had a way of transcending politics. Dogs and water hoses, police batons, axe handles and bombs, bloodying and beating up, maiming and killing non-violent protesters, seeking rights others took for granted, often broke through conservative, moderate, and liberal boundaries. Only those deeply invested in racism and segregation and unwilling to have all humans treated as equal could not empathize with victims of racial oppression and would refuse to listen to God calling humanity to stop such oppression. God and much of humanity had ached for an end to segregation, and in 1968 we could see it was legally being ended. And Martin Luther King Jr. was a brave and eloquent leader who heroically helped bring the nation to that point. Through him, most of the nation was listening and hearing God's call to justice. Powerful stuff. And it turned out to be, personally for me, profound to learn of Martin Luther King's assassination and civil rights and who Dr. King was and what he accomplished and worked toward. The seed was planted and watered and began to sprout, and I became curious about the civil rights movement and its leaders. And early on, one thing I remember, something that clicked in my young mind, was that the words of the Pledge of Allegiance we said every day at school was a solemn pledge, not just to a flag, but to this republic with liberty, justice for all. And I thought that ideal was great, but also that it wasn't fully played out. Liberty and justice for all was an ideal, a promise that I couldn't let go of. And I've never been able to let go of it. It has influenced my entire life ever since. And that ideal is part and parcel of the Bible, is part of the invocation reading from Amos, a text Reverend King was quite fond of quoting. You may recall in his famous I Have a Dream speech, one of the most passionate lines is, we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. No Christian, no American should be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Indeed, the gospel reading Tony read so well illustrates that Jesus commands his followers to do to others as you would have them do to you. We all want to be provided justice. We all want to be provided righteousness. And in America, we are taught it is due to us. And we pledge, or we used to pledge, that it is due to all, liberty and justice for all. And the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, the Reverend King led, indeed every civil rights movement has been about just that. Reverend King's ministry was not just about advocating for Jesus' command in the gospel reading that we do to others as we would have them do to us. Amazing. He found a way to use the rest of Jesus' commands in Luke 6, 27 to 30, the Sermon on the Plain, to use nonviolence as a means to accomplish it. We heard Jesus' instructions on nonviolence in the lesson. They say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Reverend King used that set of Jesus' commands as a means to try and bring about that last command I read of Jesus. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Simply put, Dr. King used non-violence to resist violence, the violence of oppression and brutality, and to work toward ending racism, a system of terrorism, many parts of which still exist. As Reverend King put it, true pacifism is not non-resistance to evil, but non-violent resistance to evil. A critical point of Jesus' commands on Reverend King's nonviolent resistance to evil and oppression and violence is not submission to evil or oppression or violence. Instead, it's love-oriented resistance with great power. Martin Luther King put it like this: love is the most durable power in the world. And for both Jesus and Martin, the bottom line is we must pursue peace through peaceful means. There's no other option to bring about peace. None. Reverend King's voice continues to cry out to us over the decades, that truth. And it is of utmost importance that we understand that Reverend King's reverberating voice from the 50s and 60s carries the voice of Christ. And one of my favorite quotes from Reverend King, he preached, through the vista of time, a voice still cries out to every potential Peter, put up your sword. The shores of history are white with the bleached bones of nations and communities that fail to follow this command. Let me stress again that doing as Jesus commanded and putting up the sword does not mean non-resistant. It means resisting with the strength of love. And I know that strikes us as odd. We think love means we have to like. And that's not so. Reverend King wrestled with this mistaken notion in his book, The Strength of Love, and he wrote, the meaning of love is not to be confused with some sentimental outpouring. Love is something much deeper than emotional bosh. Perhaps the Greek language can clear our confusion at this point. In the Greek New Testament, there are 3 words for love. The word eros is a sort of aesthetic or romantic love. The second word is philia, reciprocal love, and the intimate affection and friendship between friends. We love those whom we like, and we love because we are loved. And the third word is agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all, and overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Agape is the love of God operating in the human heart. At this level, we love others not because we like them, nor because their ways appeal to us, nor even because they possess some type of divine spark. We love everyone because God loves them. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed that he or she does. And Reverend King was actually known for having quite a bit of sense of humor, and I think we can hear a bit of it in what he writes next. Now, we can see what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. We should be happy that he didn't say, like your enemy. It's almost impossible to like something. Like it's a sentimental and affectionate word. How can we be affectionate towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush our very being and place innumerable stumbling blocks in our path? How can we like a person who is threatening our children and bombing our homes? That's impossible. But Jesus recognized that love is greater than like. When Jesus bids us to love our enemies, he's speaking neither of eros nor philia. He's speaking of agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all. Only by following this way and responding with this type of love are we able to be children of our Father who is in heaven. Reverend King was brilliant, and he was right. We can't like some folks, but we can love everyone. We can desire the well-being of even the awfulest acting people. We must not hate them. Reverend King famously pointed out, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate. Violence multiplies violence. And toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. And so when Jesus says, love your enemies, he's setting forth a profound and ultimate, inescapable admonition. Have we not come to such an impasse in the modern world that we must love our enemies or else? The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars, must be broken or we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. And Reverend King goes on to point out that hate is just as injurious to the person who hates. Like an unchecked cancer, hate corrodes the personality and eats away its vital unity. Hate destroys one's sense of values and objectivity. And finally, Reverend King notes that a third reason why we should love our enemies is that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. We never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity. By its very nature, hate destroys and tears down. By its very nature, love creates and builds up. Love transforms with redemptive power. But tomorrow is a day set aside to remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the only individual born as an American citizen for whom we have a national holiday. And there's great hope that we honor a man who both headed a movement for civil rights and did it as a spiritual leader, a Christian pastor dedicated to the most powerful, most durable, most redemptive, most transformative force in the universe, love. The end of 1868 saw us sending Apollo 8 around the moon. The very first view and photos were sent back of an Earthrise. There in space hung our small, fragile, beautiful planet. Earlier that year here in America, although it was violently and tragically cut short, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King continued his work of taking the Bible, taking Jesus' teachings and Mahatma Gandhi's practices of unconditional love and using it to alter our world, our little sphere suspended in space. And the entire planet is better off for it. What we need to do is not only remember that, but take up where Dr. King left off and spread the practice of unconditional love to alter the world through non-violent, peaceful resistance for the better. We must love our enemies. We must put up our swords. We must turn the other cheek. And when we do these things, heaven itself breaks in. And Reverend Dr. King Jr. proved this is not just talk, but truth. Let's remember that. It's Martin Luther King weekend.